It's the Canon Puncture Show, episode 81, Game Advocates, Burning Wheel. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Canon Puncture Show. This is another one of the Game Advocates episodes, and I have the fortune of bringing into the studio, the virtual studio here, none other than one of the sons of Cryos, Judd Karlman.
Hey,
Judd.
how's it going?
So, Judd, you are an aficionado of a certain game by Luke Crane?
Yes.
What would you, what's that game called?
It's called Burning Wheel. There's a funny story here. I told my roommate I was going to be online talking on a podcast about Burning Wheel, and he was like, I stopped listening to gaming podcasts because every time I downloaded one, it was just someone talking about Burning Wheel. I was sick of it. It's like, oh, what's this podcast about? Oh, it's about how much Judd loves Burning Wheel. Oh, another one? Yeah. I'm not listening to it. It's good. It's good when my friends make fun of me. It's I don't know. I also think it's hysterically funny. So yes, I love Burning Wheel. I'm a big fan of the game. I have been since it came out in 2005. I don't know. Let's go. Let's talk.
So for those of the few listeners who may not already know Sons of Cryos and your love of Burning Wheel, let's talk a little bit about Burning Wheel. What is this game?
Burning Wheel is a fantasy RPG. It is a game in which your characters the players will be asked to make very difficult decisions on behalf of their characters. That's pretty much the gist of it. I mean, when you boil it down to what it's really about, if you had to boil everything else off of Burning Wheel, you just have the beliefs left, and maybe like one six-sider. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's really at the core.
Can you tease that out a little bit? I mean, tell me, what are people doing in Burning Wheel generally?
Okay. Well, what you do is you have a world with some kind of conflict or imbalance or something. You've got a couple of orcs stranded deep in elven territory, or you've got a duke who is a usurper, or you have dwarves who are fighting for the crown of the High King. And you make a bunch of characters around this conflict, and they have beliefs and character concepts that are tied into the central conflict. So the characters are kind of tied together. That conflict can be there's a huge gaping dungeon outside of town and monsters are pouring out of it. That could absolutely be the central problem of a Burning Wheel game. And as a matter of fact, there is a PDF called Burning Thaco, which is an homage to two-hit Armor Class 0 from the old D&D days, AD&D days. And it's just about how to play Gygaxian D&D kind of stuff with Burning Wheel. But yeah, at its core, it's a life path. You make your characters via life paths, and you have beliefs and instincts and traits, and that's kind of the player's way to let the DM know, the GM know what is interesting to them and kind of what they want poked at their character, and you're off and running. Is that teased enough for you?
Yeah, that's some tease. I
Okay.
like that. You're talking about dungeons, you're talking about Burning Thaco. It just brings up the question, I mean, why not just play Dungeons & Dragons?
That is a very good question. That's a very, very, very good question. So when I was playing Dungeons & Dragons back in the day, when I was playing 2nd edition and 1st edition and was kind of frustrated, because I really wanted my game to be doing something, and D&D wasn't quite doing it. D&D wasn't confronting the thematic stuff that I wanted. In D&D, a knife isn't a viable threat, and in my fantasy worlds, I really like when a knife comes out. It is scary. It's not a D4. It is damned frightening, and Burning Wheel has that. So I was searching for something else, and I found it in Burning Wheel. If you are not searching, if you're playing D&D and you're happy, then you should continue playing D&D and being happy. That's a pretty good answer. I'll stick by it.
Yeah, I like that answer. Dungeons & Dragons is very good at what it does.
Yeah, no. I you know what the funny thing is that playing Burning Wheel for a bunch of years now, I have found that I really enjoy this latest iteration of Dungeons & Dragons more because I'm not trying to get Burning Wheel-like effects out of it. I think one of the reasons I really took to Burning Wheel so quickly, particularly the revised edition, the first edition was a little rough. I thought it was really interesting, but it was the revised edition that really grabbed me. And I think it was because I was really looking for something. And what I was looking for was Burning Wheel. I can look back at my old games and I can see moments where I was grasping for Burning Wheel mechanics and I just didn't have them. And I had great games. I had great campaigns going on. It just took a lot more muscle to make that happen because the system wasn't working with me. It was kind of just there to tell me how much damage the players took. It wasn't doing me any favors. Whereas Burning Wheel really helps. I really feel like when Burning Wheel is working, I'm working, the players are working, the system is working, we're all working in the same direction. Even when we're conflicting, it's conflicting in a way that is contributing to the table, and the table's fun. So, yeah, I was searching, and I kind of found it.
You touched on something I wanted to talk about there right at the end. What's the feel of the game at the table? What's a typical really good Burning Wheel game session feel like for the group?
That's a good question. I'm going to stop saying that's a good question. I'm going to say that every time because I really like your questions. I would say in a good session of Burning Wheel, you are taking one or more of your players' beliefs and you're challenging it. And you're saying, really? You believe that? Really? What about now? Now do you believe it? What about now? How about now? And you're just keeping on pushing them and making them make kind of tough decisions. You are rolling dice and having conflicts and having consequences for the conflict succeeding or failing. And hopefully in an average session of Burning Wheel, I don't always engage in one of the subsystems, but that's something we should probably talk about. And that's something that usually happens on an average night, is that we engage in one of the subsystems of Burning Wheel, which are range and cover, duel of wits, and fight! Exclamation point. Fight is kind of the gritty play-by-play battle. Range and cover is more missile weapons and at a distance. And duel of wits is kind of an argument. It's the political battle. It is the social battle. And hopefully in an average session, we hit one of those. Now, I have had good sessions where I don't hit any of those. I just have a lot of tests. I have a lot of rolls. And so the dice are hitting the table in an average session of Burning Wheel. And the dice are hitting the table because the players' beliefs are being challenged. So, yeah, one of those things is happening. And usually I'll throw some more Burning Wheelisms out there. On another thing that happens on an average session, even if I don't hit duel of wits, range and cover, or fight, and that'll happen. Sometimes we just won't hit those. I'm definitely hitting either a resources test or a circles test. Resources test is kind of, it's your economic stat. And you use it to find out if you want to buy something, and you also have a kind of standard of living test. So every, depending on when you set it in your game, every season or every year or every month, you have a kind of standard of living test to see if you can pay rent and get the food out, and so that's a resources test. It's also if you just want to buy something really cool. And circles test is when you want to have your character find someone in a social context. And the cool thing about that is that the player gets to add a character into the game, add an NPC into the game. And this is something that I think informally was happening at my table anyway, right? So informally, we were having circles tests. We just weren't calling them circles tests. And how the players would do this is players would be sneaky, right? Players know that they can't say, like in the old days, players knew that they couldn't DM something and say, oh, well, I know the stable guy, right? They can't say that. Mm-hmm. So they would be like talking to an NPC and they would say, oh, you know who I remember? And they would say this in character, right? Because the GM is much less likely to contradict a player who's talking in character. So you'd be in character and you'd say, oh, I remember this stable boy from my dad's old stables. He was a good lad. I remember I was teaching him how to use a sword, but I had to leave and I never got to finish. I wonder what became of him. And like, what GM would be like, oh no, there's no stable boy, and your father didn't have a stable? No way, dude. The GM runs with that. They love that stuff. So in Burning Wheel, you get to say, listen, I want to find. Maybe you get to do that. You can role play that anyway. And then later, when you want to find the stable boy, you're like, dude, I want to track down the stable boy. I want him to show up and help me break this horse. And so you roll a circles test. So I would say a good Burning Wheel game. I'm keeping on. I'm revising my original statement over and over. A good Burning Wheel game. You challenge your players' beliefs, the consequences of their actions, and are coming to the fore. Hopefully, because you challenge their beliefs, dice are hitting the table, and one of the subsystems is taken into hand. Either fight, range and cover, duel of wits, or the subsystems, which are resources and circles tests. There we go.
Okay.
That's a good game of Burning Wheel. So anyway, let's get into the fiction. What does that mean? Like, this is really boring and mechanical. In an average Burning Wheel game, you might have a dwarven prince and an elven noble arguing over a mithril shirt, right? That's like the classic Duel of Wits example that's in the book. Another resources test that I had in a game is my buddy Pete made a character who is this former thief or current thief who just got out of jail. So when he got out of jail and with his resources points, when he made his character, he bought nothing. So he was like naked. He starts the game getting out of prison for 3 years, wanting revenge, but not knowing on whom, and naked. And He had to like buy clothes. He had to like get into town and buy clothes. It was pretty cool. It was pretty damn cool. And Pete set himself up socially so that, even though he was coming out in this kind of disadvantaged resource position, he set himself up with a place to live, and he set himself up knowing people and being kind of a hero in this small slum where he was from. So it was pretty cool. So there were resources tests, and he kind of made a bunch of circles tests to kind of find out where his old crew was, and what happened to all these old thieves who were working with him when he got set up. And it was pretty cool. It was very like fantasy noir. It was really hot. Another game that I ran recently was with my buddy Storn, and Storn had a battle. The steppe nomad hordes were coming down the coast, and he had roused his county, the Lake Country rather, the Lake Country Knights to do battle with them. So we made a bunch of strategy rolls and command rolls, and we saw how the battle went. And it was cool. It was really neat. Really, really good stuff. So we kind of decided battles, whole sweeping kind of epic battles in a couple of die rolls, because we weren't really interested in the specifics of those particular things. We did it pretty quickly, and there was a lot of pre-tests and getting more dice and getting people to help, and there was a lot to it. It wasn't just a simple thing. Trying to find spies who were left in the city. It was neat stuff. So yeah, average game of Burning Wheel. The players, the characters are challenged and they react.
That's great. That's very exciting. Question though, what would you warn new players about Burning Wheel?
Oh man, yeah. I think at this point it's pretty clear, hopefully, that it's a pretty complicated game. There are a lot of subsystems. There's a lot of dice. People get intimidated by it. There's a lot of rules to this game. There's a lot of exceptions to things and places where you add +1 ob, and it's confusing. I would recommend that people start with the pre-made kind of module called The Sword. And it is a classic dungeon crawl where the players get to this treasure and there's a monster guarding it, and then they all have different ideas about who should get the treasure and what should happen. So you get to do some range and cover or fight, maybe a bloody versus, and then you get to do some duel of wits to decide what happens with the treasure. And basically you get to roll some dice and see how the game works before you make up characters. So that is my recommendation. Go to The Sword. There's a download. I'm sure Rich will link it up in the show notes. Play The Sword first. Maybe you won't even use fight or duel of wits. You'll just use straight up rolls. That's fine. Don't try to use everything at once. I think that's the big mistake people make when they do Burning Wheel, is they try to just do everything at once and they don't understand how to just make basic rolls. Just get used to making rolls, making tests, and play the sword, and then pick a stock that you like and play it. Don't do what I did, which is try to play the big, epic Tolkien pastiche hoo-ha where the orc and the elf and the dwarf and the human and the everybody get together and try to save the world. Just don't do that. I promise you don't want to do that. I promise you don't want to do that. When I did that, and it was a glorious disaster, but it was a disaster. Before we played the game, I ran all of these one-shots. And the one-shots were all, here's what's happening in the Elven Kingdom. And we do a little like one-shot in the Elven Kingdom with pre-made characters. And then we do a one-shot in a human city with a bunch of thieves. And then we did a one-shot with a bunch of dwarves. And then we did a one-shot with a bunch of orc. Now, the one-shots rocked. They worked. Everyone was happy. Everyone was playing. Everyone was playing their hearts out. We were learning the system. That really should have been the campaign. I should have teased those campaigns. I should have teased those out, and I should have made those the campaign instead of trying to do everything at once, because that was just stupid. So that would be my recommendation: is to pick one area of the fantasy that you like and concentrate on that. Play one game with a bunch of dwarves, or play one game with a bunch of humans, and once you get past the sword, you kind of work out how the dice work. And that's what I would suggest.
Judd, I'm going to throw a little question that's been in the back of my mind recently about, and I'm asking you about Burning Wheel.
Uh-huh.
But Burning Wheel's been out since 2005.
The revised edition has. I think the older one is from. There was the revised, and then the older one was 2002.
Oh, okay. So it's been out for quite a while.
Yep.
And it's, at least amongst some of the fora that I've read, there are a lot of people who are a little afraid of the complexity of the system.
Yeah.
A more recent game came out from Luke Crane, the Mouse Guard.
Yes.
And everyone started proclaiming it to be Burning Wheel Light. There was. And
I know.
Saying, I was afraid of Burning Wheel, but I wasn't afraid of trying Mouse Guard.
Yep.
So they're flocking to Mouse Guard.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that from a Burning Wheel perspective?
Yeah. I love Mouse Guard. Let's just put that right out there on the floor. I've played it, and I think it's great. I think here's why Mouse Guard is so easy to play. There are a couple of reasons. I think Luke has become a better game designer, flat out. I think he's learning his craft. He's putting out books. And because with Mouse Guard, he really wanted this to be a game where you could play with kids, where dad could play with his, daughter and son. He really had to strip it down, and he really had to make choices. And he had to kill some of his babies in order to do it. I think it made for a really great game. I don't think the great thing about gaming is that you can have Mouse Guard and you can have Burning Wheel, and they can both be on your shelf, and you can play them both, and you can enjoy them both, and they don't fight. The games don't fight. It's funny, we fight, but the games tend to get along. I just think you can just. I love Mouse Guard. I think it's great. I think it's a step up in Luke's game design. That said, there are things that I want to do that really only Burning Wheel can do. Burning Wheel is made for. Mouse Guard is made for a long-term campaign too. Burning Wheel is made for a really long haul. It really is. It is not the normal indie RPG trend lately to make a game that you can play in a couple nights and be done and put it away and feel like you've seen all the pieces move. To see all the pieces move in Burning Wheel takes, I would say, years of play. You and me, Rich, we played Burning Wheel probably weekly, probably for over a year. Mm-hmm. And we did not see all the pieces move. Nobody earned enough Artha in order to get a gray shaded stat that I know of.
Nope.
Nobody. There are a couple cogs in the machine that didn't move. We saw a whole bunch of them move, but we didn't see all of them move. And that's after a year of play. That's wild. That's some wild pickles there. So I don't like cussing because then you say pickles and my friends are like, why did you say pickles? So I just So that's wild. I mean, it's a really dense, made for the long haul game. It really is the game I wanted when I was. I wouldn't even say it's the game I wanted when I was 14. I think it's the game I wanted when I was like 19 and 20. When you're like in college and you've been GMing a couple years and you're like 19 and 20 and you're just a cocky bastard and you feel like you're the best GM in the world and your buddies are like the best players in the world and you're going to play campaigns until forever and you can stay up all night and there are no responsibilities except for college, which is easy. And, you're just rocking out into the world and you just want to game like all hell. I wish I had a Burning Wheel campaign to play when I was in college during that time. My group would have eaten it up with a damn spoon. And there's one scene in particular that was, I can see so here's the scene. My buddy Jay is playing a dwarf and everybody else in the group is human. And it's like a bunch of human kids. And Jay's character is like the dwarven Gandalf who like gathers them all up to go on an adventure, right? And they have taken this sword called Dragon's Bane. And what Dragon's Bane does is if when you kill a dragon with it, you gain a draconic trait until eventually you are a dragon, right? So they've got Dragon's Bane. They've got it. It's this vampiric, nasty sword, and they have it. And they're getting attacked. And Jay's character looks at it, and he's like, I could pick up the sword, and we could be out of this trouble. And I'm like, yep, you could. Now, he got to make that decision, but he was tortured by it, and he really wanted something else he wanted another reference point. What he wanted was a greed check, and that's what would have happened if we had Burning Wheel. He would have gotten to make a greed check because dwarves have the emotional attribute, greed. And we would have gotten to find out, can his character overcome his dwarven greed or does he not? And it would have been hard and fast and it would have been awesome. And instead, he just kind of made the decision and never quite felt right about it. And always wondered what if, So, yeah, I don't know. Burning Wheel is the game I wanted as a 20-something. I mean, I play the heck out of it now. Yeah, it's made for a really, really, really long-term game. So, etching back to Mouse Guard, I think Mouse Guard is a great game. Is it Burning Wheel light? It's built on a similar chassis, but there are things that Burning Wheel does that Mouse Guard does not do that I really love. Yeah, I think one thing I will say in Mouse Guard's sense is I think it's superior game design. I think it's brilliant. I can't think of a better intro game. And the other thing that Mouse Guard does that Burning Wheel doesn't is it spoon feeds you the situation. It spoon feeds you the settings conflict.
Yeah.
Burning Wheel hints at it and kind of flirts with it, but it doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you you are a member of the Mouse Guard. Everything in nature pretty much wants to eat you. Nature is very dangerous. Go out into the world and regulate. It just doesn't tell you that. So players have a really hard time figuring out what the heck to do with Burning Wheel sometimes. And sometimes they just hand their players the books and are like, make up a character and we'll meet next week. You can't play that way. It has to be a group endeavor. The character creation has to be a group thing. And that's a huge disconnect for some people. Huge disconnect. To the point where I've been tweeting with people and IMing with people where they're like, yeah, I really don't understand this group character generation thing. I just don't get it. And I'm like, really? And again, this is the way we played when I was a gamer growing up. So it's not alien to me. I think the reason I took to Burning Wheel and to all the techniques that it kind of presupposes is that those were the techniques that a lot of us were using. It just wasn't really supported. And now I feel supported. So here I am talking about Burning Wheel for the umpteenth time.
What do you see players loving about the game?
My buddy Aaron loves the elves. You know what? I'll go a step further. When you have people, my buddy Jesse, he loves dwarves. I haven't shown him Burning Wheel yet, but I bet he would go gaga for Burning Wheel dwarves like crazy. My friend Rich, he loves orc. I bet he would love, and he did love, the Burning Wheel orc. My friend Aaron loves elves. He's been playing elves since first edition D&D, and he was crazy about Burning Wheel elves. Like, Burning Wheel elves are the total star-bright, starlight, badass Tolkien elves that you read about in the Silmarillion. They absolutely are, the Lord of the Rings elves turned up to 11. I think people who like these kind of fantasy tropes tend to like Burning Wheel. It also, but the humans have a very different vibe to them. I find that people who like Burning Wheel humans tend to be more. I mean, it tends to be more of a George R. Martin flavor. If you've read the book, what is it called?
Game of Thrones?
Well, Game of Thrones, but there's hold on, I will look in the Burning Wheel bibliography, and I will find it. A Distant Mirror by Barbara Tuchman. The Burning Wheel, I see a lot of the life paths and a lot of the details in that book. Just very gritty, dirt under their fingernails humans, Yeah, it really supports that kind of harsh medieval play that I really kind of like. So, thumbs up. So what have I seen players like about it? I think the players like the grittiness. I think players like seeing immediate and ferocious consequences for their die rolls. I think players like having ferocious and immediate consequences for their failures, quite frankly. Because the failures in D&D aren't dead ends. They're interesting roadblocks. There was a thread recently on the Burning Wheel forums where someone was talking about failing. And I was like, you never make a climb check and fail it and then fall softly to the grass, get up, dust yourself off, and try to climb the wall again. That does not happen in Burning Wheel. A failure of a climb check means that you fall and a guard saw you, and now the hue and cry has been raised. A fall means that you fall and you fall right in front of the Duke, who is your archenemy. A fall means that you fall and you broke your leg, so now you're in this fortress with a broken leg or a sprained ankle or something horrendous. A failure means just a change in the context, and a kind of change that makes the game more interesting. So I've definitely seen my players really enjoy. They make a die roll, something cool happens. It might be what they intended. It might be a total failure. But still, it changes things for the better and it makes things cool, because the failure result and the conflict in general is about the beliefs that they wrote down on their character sheet. So it's tied into something that they're interested in. And I think that's what works. They like writing something down on their character sheet and seeing conflicts come up about it. That is what players like about Burning Wheel. That's what I like when I played. I've played a couple times.
You've actually played?
Yep.
You don't just run it?
Nope. Storm's run a couple games for me. I've played it a bunch at cons.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. I remember in your blog you were talking about actually playing that. I'll have to link that. That was some cool stuff.
Cool. Thank you. Go on. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
No, it's fun to play. I mean, it's really interesting going from a GM to playing that game, because there are just a lot of really difficult decisions that have to be made. It's just heart-wrenching. It's absolutely heart-wrenching. So playing a character gave me an insight into that. All the people who I've been playing with were like, yeah, I know, Judd. I know it's heart-wrenching making a character. I know there are all these terrible decisions to be made. And it was rough. It was really rough. But I liked it. I liked it a lot. I liked what I came out with. When you start making characters in Burning Wheel, what you find is that you don't end up exactly what you wanted because of the restraints of the life path system. You end up being surprised. So, which is, I think, a cool thing. It's like, wow, this character did that? I had no idea. So my classic example for that is my friend Jim, Jim Del Rosso, who made a character, and he knew he wanted to be a mercenary captain. And he couldn't get a skill that he really wanted unless he took Freebooter. And he was torturing about it. He was like, that's the only life path that works in the life path scheme I've got. I could rip it all apart and try all over again, but I don't know. This guy was a freebooter? This mercenary, this noble turned exile. He spent some time being Han Solo. My mercenary captain spent time being Han Solo. Why am I upset about this? This is awesome. I had no idea he was Han Solo. Hey guys, my mercenary captain was Han Solo. What? Yeah, he was a freebooter. That's kind of awesome. I know. And then we went on and played, and his conflict was over. But it was the first Burning Wheel character that he had made, so he was really tortured about it. And I think it was a really important lesson. It was like, yeah, you're not going to get exactly what you want. Now, mind you, some of my players were bug F crazy. They couldn't make the character they wanted, and it frustrated them, and they threw the books away, and they said, I'm never playing this game again. It totally happened. Totally it happened. So, whatever. It's not the game for everybody.
So you touched on that.
Yep.
What are some other reasons that people hate this game?
Oh, man, there are so many reasons. It's like a seasonal thing that happens. The flowers open and bloom, the leaves change, the air turns cold, and every month with the tide, there is a Burning Wheel thread on RPG.net, and everyone who hates it gets to come out and say why they hate it. So if you really want to know, you can just wait, 12 days. I think that's when the next cycle comes through. It really is. It's like the tide. I go online and I'm like, oh, it's time for the monthly Burning Wheel thread on RPG.net. I'm glad that everybody who hates it gets to come out and say why. It's good for them. It gets to vent. Yeah. Why do they hate it? Here are some reasons why. Because I always read those threads, even if I don't always respond. But here are some of the reasons. People who do not want to make hard decisions hate Burning Wheel. People who like to go a whole game session without rolling the dice once, and that is the epitome of good role-playing. Don't like Burning Wheel. People who want the system to fade into the background and barely be there at all, just a little whisper. The character sheet is like this kind of suggestion. Don't like Burning Wheel. People who don't like mastering a very difficult, kind of robust, dense system. Don't like Burning Wheel. My girlfriend is definitely among them. She calls Burning Wheel the birth control game because the character sheet, the damage wheel looks like birth control. It just makes her dizzy. The character sheet absolutely makes her eyes cross. That said, when she's played Burning Wheel, she's done awesome stuff. But I don't think it would be her first choice. So yeah, people who don't like Burning Wheel, people who don't want a dense system, they just don't want it. They should not be playing it. And that's a big thing with Burning Wheel. I think there are other games where maybe you can get by without somebody who's really passionate about it. I think with Burning Wheel, you've got to have players who are out to master that game. You really have to. It can't be a game where the GM knows the system and everybody else coasts. You really need to have players who get an understanding of it. You really do. Otherwise, I think it doesn't particularly work. So, yeah, those are the people who hate it.
Wow. There's some good reasons, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not, I mean, and when you boil it down, it's like, well, that's not the game for you, I mean, because you can see the people who come online, and because there have definitely been threads where it's like, I'm thinking about getting Burning Wheel, but I really don't like this and that. And it's like, well, if you don't like this and that, you don't like Burning Wheel. You should not be playing this game. Seriously. Don't play this. Get a different game. You're going to be heartbroken. You're not going to like it.
Anything else you want to talk about Burning Wheel related?
Oh, man. I'm trying to think. I don't know. It's good. It's fun. I've really liked it. In the last 4 years, it is probably the game I've played the most. I love Burning Wheel, but I have a lot of games I love. I don't know. It just kind of happened. I think it's because, I think one of the reasons is because Ithaca is a very transient town. So I have friends coming in to town all the time. And all of the friends that have moved into Ithaca are all people who I'm like, oh, you need to see Burning Wheel. Or they've read things I've written about it. And they're like, all right, Judd, I want to play a damn Burning Wheel campaign. I've read the book. I've read your threads. I want to, I'm like, how can I can't turn them down. It's a physical sickness. If someone says they want to play a Burning Wheel campaign, I just feel like I can't. It's just, I'm an addict. I'm coming out of the closet. I really have trouble saying no. I really, really, really do. And I'm learning now that I just don't have time for that many games. But it's really difficult. I love playing the game. I love setting it up. I love seeing the world come together and world burning with my players. I just love all that stuff. I think it's snazzy. Yeah, it's difficult though. I don't think Burning Wheel is a game for beginners. I think Mouse Guard is a much better game for beginners. I'm really interested to see if there's going to be a generation of gamers who were 12 years old and played a bunch of Mouse Guard and then went and played Burning Wheel. I wonder how that transition is going to work and what those kids are going to be like. I just think it's going to be really neat. You have a generation of gamers who are used to making really difficult choices at the table. It's pretty rocking. It's good stuff. Really good stuff. Ooh, I'm talked out. I feel like I have so much more to say. I'm like, oh, we didn't even talk about Let It Ride. And I'm like, oh, well, that's not that important. Yeah, Burning Wheel, there it is. That's it. Anything else, Rich?
No, I just want to say thank you for coming back on the show. And,
my pleasure.
And thanks for talking to me about Burning Wheel. I really appreciate having you as a game advocate, Judd.
No, that's my pleasure. I love coming on. I, as my podcast record shows, really love talking about Burning Wheel.
We had such potential, such promise.